Now, I get to introduce my guest, and then we go into the issues that we have to deal with this morning. I'll introduce Abdul Malik Kwekubako. Nonetheless, he's here in the studio. He will take his seat shortly. Abdul Malik Kwekubako is back. You've been yearning for him to be back, so I decided to introduce him even when he was not in the seat. He's the editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, and he's a regular panelist on the show. Also on the show this morning is Dr. Steve Mantea. He is campaign coordinator, Integrated Social Development Center, ISODEC. Also, Madam Monacote is former Deputy Finance Minister, and I love to have her on the show. Nana Akomia, Director of Communications of the Opposition New... did you write Opposition New Patriotic Party? These producers, what went wrong? Okay, Nana, that's what's been written for you. Director of Communications of the Opposition New Patriotic Party. Well, he's in government, and like I said the last time, the next time he shows up on this show, the title will change, and I know that for a fact. Thank you, Nana, for coming. He's also here. He will join us right now. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning and thank you.
Good. Always refreshing to have you on the show.
Thank you
for coming. And Dr. Mantea, very happy that you're here. Now, let's begin by going to hear what Nana Addo Dankwa-Akufo-Addo, the president, has had to say about free senior high school, his flagship project since whenever he started campaigning for president. Let's hear him.
The government of Ghana will fund the cost of public senior high schools for all those who qualify for entry from the 2017-2018 academic year onwards. Free SHS would mean that in addition to tuition, which is already free, there will be no admission fees, no library fees, no science center fees, no computer lab fees, no examination fees, no utility fees. There will be free textbooks, free boarding, and free meals. Free SHS will also cover agricultural, vocational, and technical institutions.
So this is what the president had to say. But in the course of the week, as the discussion began, we had the senior minister, Yao Osafo-Maafo, say something else, in addition to what the president has said. He said the project is likely to be financed. One of the sources of financing it, most likely, will be the Heritage Fund. And I think that is what has brought about all of the discussion we are going to have now. Now, let's hear Mr. Ato Forson, who is also a former Deputy Minister of Finance and a Member of Parliament, and the reaction that they gave to Yao Osafo-Maafo.
Use the Heritage Fund is therefore not just an incompetent way of redeeming a campaign promise, but a lazy man's approach that completely undermines the national consensus and painstaking effort made to create a balance among the following: A, savings versus expenditure; 2, recurrent expenditure versus capital expenditure; and C, allocating of national resources among all sectors of the economy. It is obvious that the Heritage Fund, its investment and the amount accrued so far, would be woefully inadequate to meet close to $1 billion required annually to underwrite a free senior high school program. We also wish to remind Ghanaians that the proposal to allocate the Heritage Fund to education is not without other costs. First, the Heritage Fund forms part of the core reserves of the nation through Bank of Ghana, which takes into account the long-term needs of the nation, such as the macroeconomic stability of the country. Secondly, the notion that the Heritage Fund is set aside from the country's fiscal management is erroneous, since a critical examination of the fiscal table in the budget shows that there's an accounting set-off between revenue generation and deficit financing. Therefore, the withdrawal of Heritage Fund is likely to have a negative impact on the country's reserve, the value of the currency, and will lead to a likely destabilization of the macroeconomic and fiscal situation of the country. We urge the NPP government to stay off the Heritage Fund, hands off the Heritage Fund, for it is particularly reserved as savings for future generations. Since petroleum resources are not renewable, future generations deserve a shot at progress, and that is what the Heritage Fund seeks to achieve.
So that's Ato Forcing leading the minority in Parliament to react to the suggestion by Mr. Yao Safo-Mafo that the Heritage Fund was one of the most likely sources for funding the free SHS by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Well, a day after that, you heard the finance minister, and he was very categorical that there will not be resort to the Heritage Fund. Kweku Kwating Ministry had this to say. We hear him, and then we come to do the discussion.
Government has not made any decision to finance the free SHS program from the Heritage Fund. That has to be understood from the outset. Government has not made that decision. I agree with many of the views that have been shared that if at all government decided to do that, it would require some legislative changes. We are mindful of the fact that if that were done, it would deplete the Heritage Fund. So many of the perspectives shared for me are legitimate points of view expressed, except to say that we should wait for the 2017 budget statement that is going to be presented in the first week of March. And of course, the free SHS is a commitment to Ghanaians that we will fulfill in this budget statement. The funding sources for the programs we roll out in the 2017 budget statements will be made clear.
All right, so that's Kweku Kwating. He's also a member of Parliament and with the NPP. Now, ahead of Tuesday, when the president is likely to present the budget for the year, when we may get some clarity, let's deal with this matter in substance, the free SHS program, and more particularly, the questioning of where the funding is coming from. And Nana, I posed a question part of my introduction, whether since the infamous, difficulty that Nana Addo Dankwa had with Stephen Saka on the BBC, when he had difficulty telling what it cost, you don't seem to have gotten around and clearly identified how you're going to fund this project.
Well, thank you, Samson. Let me wish my co-panelists a good Saturday morning, and also our audience. Everybody should have a good day today. On this matter of education, I think all of us around this table will recognize that education is probably the biggest tool that any government can have in alleviating poverty. There's no doubt about that all of us sitting here probably are able to sit here and take part in national discourse and national development because we had some education. There's no doubt about that. Somebody like myself, I came from, both my parents were peasants living in the little village called Insutem in Achimi, Buakwa. And if they hadn't afforded me education, I'll probably also be a peasant farmer, growing maize and cassava on subsistence level. But I'm able to do something else because I had some education. So there's no doubt about the importance of education. And the woman who's selling granules by the roadside or selling trapia in the sun with her child strapped at her back, probably earns 5 cedis, 10 cedis a day.
What's trapia in Chi?
Trapia. Chewing stick.
Chewing stick.
Yeah.
In English, I meant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trapia selling chewing stick. When I meet some of these people, I ask them, how much do you make in a day? And they tell me we make 5 cedis the whole day, 10 cedis. And she has a child at her back and so on. Of course, you can't transfer public monies to her. But if you're able to give that child on her back some good education, in 20 years, 25 years, that child will be in a position to give her mother a certain lifestyle that will raise the mother. So it's a sustainable way of raising people out of poverty. So free education, which then would ensure that no child is deprived of the capacity to be able to live up to their own potential. Free education there's no debate about it. I'm happy that my party, the NPP, and the president, Nana Akufo-Addo, is very keen on ensuring that every child in Ghana is able to have secondary school education. It reinforces and cements the awesome credential of the NPP as the party with the most social democratic credential of any party in this country, in the Fourth Republic. There's no, already our credentials have been established with the historical National Health Insurance, which without any debate is the biggest social intervention of any government in the Fourth Republic. And if we add the free SHS, then our credentials in social democracy and in the welfare and advancement of our people would be completely unchallenged as a party. I don't even want to talk about the LEAP and the maternal care and the NYP and some of those things. Just free SHS, NHI, free healthcare, and so this will cement the party's social credentials, and it's going to win us a lot more people from other parties who profess social democracy only in name. Now, the costing. You talked about Nana Akufo-Addo on the BBC. You remember that subsequent to that, after the BBC interview, when the NPP was launching its manifesto for the 2012 election on the 29th of August 2012 at the press center in Accra, and the presentation made by Jan Bafo, the Professor Jan Bafo, had a detail of the rollout of the NPP free education for the 4 years between 2013 and 2016, and where the costing was going to come from. I think we afforded your good self, Samson Ayeni, a copy of that program here. But 4 years down the line, of course we didn't win power, but 4 years down the line, economic indicators have changed, revenue streams have changed, so we have to modify what we brought, what we presented in 2012. And the finance minister has made it clear that in the budget, between the president's sessional address and the budget, the parameters of the funding will be laid clear. This business of the Heritage Fund, which was mentioned by the senior minister, obviously was not policy. These were words of the senior minister who was thinking aloud. The finance minister has come out categorically that the heritage funds would not be a part of the funding parameters for the free SHS, and that there are other funding sources, sustainable funding sources, which have been identified and which will be presented to the nation, both in the sessional address and in the budget. So really, that's where we are. We are all waiting eagerly for the funding sources that would come out in the sessional address or in the budget. Many people were a bit taken aback at the rapidity that the president has pledged to introduce free SHS. People thought that it will come in the second year or even the third year of the Nana Akufo-Addo administration. But the NADO wants it to happen right in the first year, and that shows his determination to carry out this social, major social change in this country.
People are asking questions. People are asking questions. The feeding grants program we have presently, how are we managing it? Schools in the northern and upper regions that are supposed to get some grants. We know they are almost always in arrears. Their schools are not opened in time. Sometimes they get extensions when they come on vacation. We have not been able to deal with that. The constitutional provision and injunction to the government is progressively free. The NDC has started that. Why is the NPP jumping the gun? That's what the question that's being put to you. How do you answer that?
Well, as for the NDC, you said they've started. The NDC, sometimes they talk from both sides of their mouth. They look forward and backwards at the same time. Because you remember in 2012, they waged a major campaign against free education. And then when they came into office, they said that they were introducing free education. Everybody was surprised at the about 10. Be that as it may, it was a good thing that they had recognized also. After campaigning, spending so much money to campaign against free education in 2012, they turned around. We're all happy that they've turned around. They've started some very, very limited intervention in providing free education. I think they were providing a total of 38 cedis or so a term, when the fees for the term were in excess of 150 cedis. And so they said it was progressive. It's progressive. Now, what we are doing is take it forward, because it's a major priority of the NPP and Nana Akufo-Addo. You talked about the problems with doing feeding grants and feeding subsidy and so on. And these are smaller figures, school feeding. Samson, of course, I am sure the NPP will be looking at tweaking the policy to making something like school feeding more efficient. And the thinking is going on about how to improve school feeding. Maybe, off the top of my head, I can think of a modification that would say, don't award one contractor to feed a school, because then there's no alternative. There's no competition. So that's where you have the rotten tomatoes and so on. But if you license 4 or 5 contractors to feed a school, and all of them have their feeding stands, then the students have a choice. And so everybody then will be making sure that their food is up to scratch. But the funding, whether it's school feeding, whether it's feeding grants, whether it's feeding subsidy and all of that, whether it's a subsidy for schools for the blind and so on, it's all a matter of government priority. It's a matter of priority. Because you have a situation where a government will not provide monies for schools for the disabled, blind people and so on. Now, visually impaired, I think that's the correct step. But you have a government that will not provide funding on a timely basis to schools, visually impaired people. So government will not provide funding, feeding grants, so that you open school and almost 80 schools cannot reopen because they haven't got the funding to feed the students. But the same government will be able to pay judgment debts, for example. $35 million judgment debt is then paid within a period of 6 months. Payments to JIDA and all of that, over $100 million paid dubiously and so on. But then you can't get money to, much smaller monies to do feeding grants. So it's a matter of priority. And once the government has said education is my priority, then that government will prioritize spending on education.
The question that I don't seem to get an answer to from you, and I'm asking the final time to you, is the claim based on the Constitution, grounded on the Constitution, is that the framers of the Constitution understood the enormous financial obligations for the implementation of such a program. And so they said it should be progressive. why is the NPP, knowing what you know is in the kitty, in a hurry to begin one-off?
Well, you believe that we are taking on more than we can chew. That's what I get from your question, isn't it? Your question implies that the NPP, by providing that kind of extensive free services at secondary school, may be taking on more than we can chew in terms of our financial resources. That's what you are saying. But the government obviously doesn't believe so. That the government believes that it will be able to, in terms of priority, find the resources to do this important program. So, like I've said, it's a matter of priority.
Okay.
And it's a matter of efficiency in government. So let's wait and see what funding streams will be identified in both the sessional address and the budget. And then we can debate about the sustainability of those sources.
Okay. Now, Madam, what do you say in response to...
She supports me.
In response to what Nana Akumia has been talking about?
Thank you very much, Samson, and good morning to your viewers. And I first of all, I say congratulations to Nana Akumia and his party for a good, well-fought election. It seems as if Nana is still in campaign mode from the way that he's talking. I wish that he would be more reconciliatory and we could just chat about how to move this forward, because it's a better Ghana agenda, whether we all like it or not. And therefore, if there's even a way that we can help, I'm sure we can. First of all, we have definitely set the grounds for the new government to be able to achieve a lot of their promises in the manifesto. This flagship one, which refers to free SHS education, is one that we've already started in terms of progressive SHS. And that is the prudent way of funding a sector like education, which we all agree is an important sector of the economy in terms of now and in the future. And how you do it, for me as a planning student, it's not just about prioritizing, but that whole plan, preparing for it, identifying what needs to be done and how you do it. How you fund it is very critical as well. But I want to even start from, where is that action plan? Yes, it's a promise, but where is the plan? People are coming up and speaking to parts of the plan, what it is, how it is, when it will be, but we need to see it all together. And when I say we, I even speak as parents who have children who will be going to school in September of this year. And yet we don't have any clarity about what the plan is. One person talks about Heritage Fund. I'm glad that Nana has taken that off the table this morning. So I won't dwell too much on that, because that goes into the Public Petroleum Revenue Management Act and so forth. Let's leave that. Let's go to the budget, which the Minister of Finance, Ken, spoke to, that there is an envelope that he's looking to tap into. We are wondering which envelope that is in the context of the IMF program that we are in now, and the fact that we are even having difficulties achieving some of the targets or benchmarks that we're supposed to achieve, and also in the absence of central bank funding. So one would ask, exactly how is this thing going to be done? First of all, I believe that His Excellency the President spoke about letting students now be confident people, not just textbook, but also being able people who can think critically. I think that that is a noble concept. That is the kind of labor force that we want to see in the future. Have we prepared our teachers for that? Do we have the curriculum for that? Have we prepared the institutions and even the infrastructure for that? For the infrastructure, I can almost say yes. The NDC government, the last government, put in place many infrastructure projects towards having containers, as it were, for people to work in, ensuring that teacher training was going on. In fact, we looked at cutting teacher training allowance so that we could increase the numbers of students going into teacher training. But I now see that this new government is rather prepared to spend on allowances in the, with the goal of motivating trainees and teachers alike. But I think that we need to look at that curriculum again and how to achieve these goals that His Excellency the President has brought about. In terms of funding, again, we all know that even if we looked at the annual budgeting fund, amount, the ABFA, which is still petroleum revenue, and where you are allowed to spend predominantly on capital expenditure and some on recurrent expenditure, one needs to be careful. The education budget is predominantly recurrent expenditure with some capex, but mainly recurrent. So the ABFA clearly cannot do that properly, number one. Number two, oil prices, which are very volatile. We all saw oil prices move from $110 per barrel in 2013 to less than $50, $40 per barrel by the end of 2014. And it has not gone back to those high prices again. So clearly the funding has dried up into the petroleum revenue account. Therefore, if it's from the envelope and within this IMF program, one is wondering where this money will come from. First of all, we all know that we have private education, we have public education, and this is about public education. We know that we used to have missionary schools, they become government schools. It is so obvious that government cannot fulfill the promise now, but can fulfill it later. And we would all want it to fulfill it later. But it needs to prepare the steps towards doing that so that we don't have a failure or an abortion of this noble goal. So I think that talking about don't worry, it will come from the budget, wait and see, we'll read it on Tuesday and you'll see where it will come from. Clearly it's not coming from private sector. Clearly there isn't going to be cost recovery from the way it's going. You're going to even try and feed day students. My goodness, day students are fed by their students. You were saying you will even feed them. Boarding school, do we have enough dormitories? Dormitories come with utility expenses, it comes with security expenses. Even when we talk about...
the president said will be taken care of.
Well, from where we are still...
utilities.
There'll be no utilities,
yes,
there'll be darkness and there'll be no water, or there will be water and electricity, but somebody else will pay for it. There will be the need for security. Parents who are even poor and vulnerable, once their children are in school, expect that the children will be safe. If that doesn't happen, there will be an issue. So, Samson, I think that there is a lot of thought and planning that needs to go into this concept in order for it to really take shape. We started by the progressive nature, which is the way you sequence into a goal. I mean, I hear Nana Komia say that we were against it and so. We were not against it, but we looked at cost recovery, and therefore it was a difficult thing to do. However, it doesn't mean that you can't start from somewhere. Any journey starts with the first step, and we have come a long way, and I would have expected that the Honorable soon-to-be Minister would have congratulated us and thanked us for setting up a strong, stable foundation that they can achieve their goals of. So I think that as Ghanaians, we still need to debate where the money will come from. I don't think next week's budget reading is going to tell us how we are going to pay for this completely, meaning from now till whenever it will be fully in place and so forth, where you are not paying for anything, there's no cost recovery. As a nation, we need to start moving towards where we are able to deliver service, deliver projects that can pay for themselves and that can be sustained into the long term.
Right.
Not projects that will start to fail and other governments have to come and fix,
the president
which we will be able to do when we come back in 4 years' time.
The president said, and let's remind ourselves that when he said by free SHS, we mean that in addition to tuition, which is already free, there will be no admission fees, no library fees, no science center fees, no computer laboratory fees, no examination fees, no utility fees. There will be free textbooks. I think that's already on.
Free boarding.
And free meals. And day students will get a meal at school for free. While some accuse the NPP of, or the government, of something for a political advantage, even though it's difficult looking at the financial circumstances to do, and that explains why they can't seem to be coherent with the sources. The other accusation is that the NDC is also equally afraid that if this is implemented, then they're going to be in opposition forever.
Samson, there is no fear.
This is a very bold project that all must support.
This is a bold project that all must support, I agree. But the thing about fear, let's take that off the table completely. There is no fear. It's about Ghanaians enjoying free, quality education. All that we are saying is that this must be thought through properly. There must be a deliberate targeting. It should not be so wide. We had the experience of tax exemptions for bringing in investments. We all saw the disadvantages of making it so wide and not targeting. We are just saying that learning from our experience, this government can achieve success by learning from our experience.
And when you say deliberate targeting, what do you mean?
Deliberate target. Look for those students who qualify to come into senior secondary school, because it talks about universal. It's like every student can go into secondary school. But we all know that the education structure all over the world is a pyramid. Not everyone who starts get to the top. Other people divert into other things that they want to do. We even have school dropouts, people who just don't want to go. But more importantly, there must be qualification to the next step. So you qualify and go. Once you qualify, you must be supported. And
what do you say to those who say, if you do it in the targeted manner that you suggest, you will be infringing the Constitution, which is against discrimination?
No. The discrimination talks about certain criteria. Now, not qualifying is not one of the criteria. If you don't pass to go, that is not one of the discriminatory factors. So we are saying that all those who can pass and qualify should go, and will support this government in this bold endeavor. However, this bold endeavor should not fail. Therefore, we are not fearful. A fearful person will not talk about somebody else's failure. But we are saying that your bold endeavor should succeed. And therefore, let us look at proper, stable funding that can be sustained over the long term. It's not just a matter of priority, but we must prepare for it, and we must have funding that does not mess up our budget deficit, funding that does not take us back to a high salaries and wages to GDP or to revenue. First of all, we should even be working on our tax revenue. We've been working on tax administration to improve it so that we can have more revenue. We've been looking at all our other sources of funding, minerals, oil, so forth, to bring in revenue. We haven't brought in enough revenue to cover our expenditure. We have a budget deficit situation on our hands. How do we now start talking about free? Just when we've taken subsidies of petroleum products, we now put subsidies in education. How do we do that? We still need power for education. We still need utilities for education, as you've rightly said. So I think it needs more thought, and we can be of help rather than talking about
Let me come to Dr. Steve Manteyao. And the Constitution requires that governance will be organized in such a manner that citizens will live a life of dignity. Nana Kumia refers to giving people a dignified life. And how to start that is to ensure that everybody get at least basic education. The Constitution again says that we should, since we started the Republic, this Fourth Republic, 2 years after, we should have, within 10 years, from 2 years after or so, have achieved universal basic education. What they are seeking to do is to include SHS in the whole strata of the basic education. So if after how many decades we still have not been able to achieve that, why would anybody at all accuse the NPP of trying to jump or go ahead of itself on the question of free SHS, because the Constitution says progressive? Progressive should have started when and ended when?
Well, thank you very much. Let me first make the point that at ISODEC, we believe in social justice.
The president spoke at your school.
That's right, yes. And incidentally, I happen to have been the school prefect
I see.
Some years back.
Yes. So proud of Kwafa.
That's right.
Yeah.
We believe in social justice. And it's heartwarming to hear Honorable Akomia make the point about their party believing in social democracy. If we have managed to, maybe by virtue of the political discourses and the trend in the country, won a libertarian party over to social democracy, it furthers our quest for social justice in this country. So we are happy. But let me say that I have no doubt in my mind that we all as a country believe that free education is good and is feasible. And let me say that for countries with even weaker economy than Ghana have managed to do this for about a decade. And I'm referring to Uganda. At the time when Uganda introduced free SHS, the economy of Uganda was worth a mere $12 billion. Today, when Ghana is contemplating the introduction of free SHS, our economy is worth $37 billion. Uganda relied heavily on taxation to finance it. It means realignment of your spending priorities. And so if they've been able to tax their 12 billion to make this happen, what stops us from taxing our 37 billion for making this happen? And I relate this to the fact that there's too much leakages in our tax administration system. During the time of Madam Munakorte, when the then Minister for Finance was busy taxing cutlasses and condoms, a loophole in our law allowed the EO Group and Sabre Oil to get away with the non-payment of 70 million potential tax revenue. Because there was inconsistency between the Petroleum Income Tax Law and the provisions in the General Income Tax Law. EO Group was the first to sell. We were not able to tax it. A year on, Sabre Oil sells and gets away with the non-payment. Only then, the Finance Minister comes to Parliament and announces that henceforth, the provisions in the General Income Tax Law shall apply to the Petroleum Income Tax Law after the horses are bolted. Some recent work I did has helped the GRE to recover as much as $12 million from just a single transaction. I'm referring to the gas project, the Sinopec executed gas project. And so many, in fact, ISODEC has done some work which highlights that most of our exports from this country are undervalued and exports are overvalued. We had the opportunity of meeting the management of the Ministry of Finance to present this and ask for their cooperation to establish an ICT model that helps us to track real-time transactions, to be able to flag it whenever there is an incidence of tax avoidance. But we didn't get the cooperation. So we may come back to how we finance, but I think that we can rely heavily on our taxes to finance this. Whatever we decide in terms of the heritage fund, whatever petroleum revenue, should be additional. But let me also say that the establishment of the Petroleum Heritage Fund has an antecedent. Look, this country produced gold for over 100 years and ended up as a highly indebted poor country. A sad commentary of how we mismanaged that resource. I mean, rationally in life, you do not squander your asset. You invest your asset and live off the dividends from that investment. But what have we done in the gold sector? All revenue accrued in a year, we channel into the next year's budget and spend everything, mostly on recurrent expenditure items. We even sold our golden share in Anglo Gold Ashanti and used it to pay salaries. I'm not saying salaries are not important. Sure that's true. That's what we did. No. That is what we did.
No, it's not true.
Right, you can come in when you have your opportunity.
I'm sorry.
But I'm saying that is what we have, how we have lived. So if you ask anybody to show us what we have done with gold revenue over 100 years, we'll have nothing to show. That's for me the point. And so in 2007, when we discovered oil, the then President Kufuor decided that we are not going to repeat the mistakes we've made in the mining sector, in going into the oil sector. So in 2008, the government organized a first Ghana Oil for Development Conference in Gimpa. And that set the pace for the discourse around the arrangements we currently have in the law regarding how we manage petroleum revenue. Indeed, I'm happy that when the NDC inherited, we went into a transition in 2009, barely a year after we started the processes. But I'm happy that the NDC stayed the course. They did not change the lead person, who was Professor Mwakutufor, who was leading the processes towards the establishment of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. We didn't change him. So we stayed the course. We had intensive negotiations and nationwide consultations. And we agreed that going into the oil, we're not going to spend all our revenue. We're going to leave something against the future. Look, reference is made in the law to future generation. And I think we are misinterpreting what is meant by future generation. It is not today's youth. It is not those who are born even next year. It is that generation that will not be lucky to meet our oil endowment. And so we are looking far, far into the future when the resource has been depleted. Well, and even that, the law says that when we get to that point, whatever is in the Heritage Fund and the Stabilization Fund will be merged to constitute the Ghana Petroleum Wealth Fund. At that point, we are not even going to be allowed to spend it. Right. We are going to invest and spend the dividend from that investment.
Right. But that argument you make about the stashing away what we get from the petroleum revenue, and the Petroleum Revenue Management Act is very clear. In fact, if they needed to have resort to that, they will need to amend it. And it's going to be easy for them if they wanted to do, because they have a near supermajority in Parliament. But people like Jeffrey Sachs, you know him, he says that Norway, with extensive physical and human capital already in place, the best choice might well be to accumulate financial assets. For poor countries, however, it is likely to make much more sense to turn oil earnings quickly into fiscal assets and human capital. Now, his response is supported by several others who say the example for which we set up the Stabilization Fund and the Heritage Fund applies elsewhere where they already have the infrastructure. But in our situation, and as I quoted President John Mahama in my introduction, he says, we live in a country where women are dying because the road from their villages to a health facility is not done. And you say that the oil wealth God has blessed us with should be left for generations to come while that woman dies today because she can't go to the hospital? And this is the argument from Jeffrey Sachs' point that my good friend, lawyer Yao Opong, writing an academic piece, says it makes every sense to invest that money in today so that the future generations that are coming will come and meet, opportunities.
Samson, all that you read were taken into account in the negotiations that went on to come to this particular kind of settlement. And that is the reason why we decided that we are going to make available as much as 91% of oil revenue for expenditure, for current use. 70% into the ABFA. Correct. 21% stabilization fund, which is available also for spending, because whenever you have a shortfall, you go and take it.
Yeah, Steve, Samson, the things that you said, which on their own sound fine as they stand, but are not in proper context, because the revenue, the petroleum revenue, it's not all of it that is being kept away for future generations.
That's right.
It's a very small part. It's just 9%
that
is being kept away. That is your savings. That is the money that no matter what happens, you keep in that box.
And we understand even the total of what we put there
but you have
cannot take care of this project for a year.
No, it cannot. It's only $277 million.
Right.
So it's about 1 billion cedis. It can't do it. But a majority of the revenue is put at the disposal of today. And that is why the NDC government was able to lay out more roads, were able to build more hospitals, and more women were able to get access to good health service. Maternal mortality rates came down. Children were able to grow above the age of 5 and be around today. All the young men sitting here today have benefited from all of that since President Kwame Nkrumah's time. So let's not confuse that little 9% that we are saving with the whole 91% that is available for other uses. In fact, 70% for immediate capital expenditure and some recurrence.
So I'll come back to the point that that's what all that you read supported the current arrangement, that we will spend the bulk of the money today.
Exactly.
Now, how are we spending the bulk of the money today?
Right.
And that's what I want to come to.
Okay. And you have pointed to loopholes that we can get a lot from.
We have spread the ABFA expenditure so thinly that we cannot even feel the impact. In some instances, there has been clear cases of abuse. And I'll point to, for instance, at the time when your national health insurance was on its knees, you took as much as 2 million Ghana cedis in the name of capacity building and gave it to the Musicians Association of Ghana, Musica. That's your priority.
Of course, you will not forget the example of the part of it that was used
I'm
to
coming to the
brand
buses. Yeah, I'm coming to that as well. We took about 3.6 million, was even exaggerated. I mean, there were some, corruption involved in that, to brand buses. Now, recently, as recent as 2016, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, on which I serve, went on some fact-finding mission in the north. Monies had been allocated as far back as 2014 to a project, Duri Dam, somewhere in the Jirapa area. We got there, no project, money gone. We went to Nakori Dam. Monies had been allocated from the same ABFA for some channeling works on the Nakori Dam. No channeling works have been done, money not seen.
No, Samson, I must say here categorically that the projects had been, money had been allocated for the projects. The projects had not yet been done, as Dr. Mantiyao says, but money had not left. And we did explain that to them in Parliament, that the money had not left the account at all. In fact, that money is still sitting in the ABFA account.
Is it not surprising? Is it not surprising?
Not left.
Is it not surprising?
And hopefully Nana Komia
is it not surprising
can use that money, but that money has not left.
No.
Let's not say the wrong things. The money has not left. It was not used at all.
If you can help me,
just allow me 1 second.
If you allow me to conclude,
if it is the case, you
then
conclude.
she can come in.
You conclude. If it is the case that money has actually left and there's no project whatsoever, then it means that some people should get ready for jail, right?
Exactly.
Samson, I'm making an argument. Allow me
go ahead
to complete.
Yeah.
I'm saying that monies had been disbursed, project not executed. Most of the monies were disbursed or allocated in 2014. We went there in 2016. It's not like we are talking about the same year.
She says you have been explained. They have explained to you. You don't like the explanation.
No. We wrote to the ministry.
Right.
We got no official response.
We responded in Parliament.
From the ministry. If somebody, a statutory body, writes to you, an oversight body, make these substantial findings and write to the minister for a response, and the minister refuses to respond.
That's not true.
Officially to the body, all that Madam Korte is talking about are information we've gotten unofficially.
No, we met in Parliament.
We want a methodological approach to our work.
Okay.
So we
let's
take
not
it step
change the
at
subject,
a time.
but it's important you point out these things.
The point I'm making is that, look, as much as 2.9 billion Ghana cedis have been available for spending in the last 5-6 years. They've entered the economy, and this is additional revenue. Do Ghanaians feel the impact? No. If no, what's the reason? And I'm saying that we have not been prudent in the way we spent that money. Look, Kwame Nkrumah,
is it really the case that Ghanaians don't feel the impact? She's referred you to the hospitals, to the expansive road infrastructure, to the schools that are ongoing.
Look, if you unpack the expenditure, you even be more worried. In 2015, we used ABFA to cover everything education. Everything education. Examination fee, school uniform, school feeding, classroom blocks, laboratories, everything education. Okay. No, the worry for me is this. If we have a Ghana Education Trust Fund, fund, okay, purposely dedicated to education, and then you come to use the ABFA to cover everything education, including even Mohammed's day secondary schools, then I get worried because if you're not careful, your oil money, rather than becoming additional, will be replacing statutory existing funds.
Very, very interesting and revealing
can I
points
speak
there.
to the Uganda case study, please?
Just hold on briefly for me. Yes, okay. Kweku says I should let you.
Thank you so much, Kweku.
Have your take on that. Uganda had 12 billion, and yet they were able to prosecute the free education agenda. We have 37. Why can't we?
Yes, why can't we? I just want to say that by all means, in any situation, there's a need for strong monitoring and evaluation. There will be some letdown sometimes and so forth. So Dr. Manteo speaks to some of these things. And PIAC is a very important institution that oversees what we do on behalf of the nation. We did sit together in Akosombo with all of them and discuss some of the things that he raised. And we were able to respond, because in any audit, you are given a chance to respond. And we're able to respond and show that even though monies had been allocated, they ended up not actually being disbursed for many other reasons. So I just want to place that on record. I also agree that, there have been times where the ABFA has been spent on other things that they shouldn't have been spent on. I'm practical about that. In the case of Uganda, which had free SHS education, they spend about $52 per secondary school student. For us, on average, we have spent about $412 per student. And in fact, in 2017, it is possible that the minimum we'll spend will be about $800. So yes, Uganda, with their 12 billion GDP, did $52 per student. But we are even today
Have you checked
looking
what the
at 800
is in Uganda?
Exactly, another issue, the quality of it. And this is one of the things I was, he agrees, and this is what we were talking about. That
no quality at all.
Let's not be careful.
So now there is a private sector that is taking over in the provision of quality education in Uganda.
Let's be careful that we don't go into this bold thing and then deteriorate quality or abort it altogether.
That was a quick intervention.
But that was the, I do want to state that this Uganda thing doesn't mean it can just happen in
that was
Ghana.
very useful. Now, Kweku, Dr. Manteya points to sources of funds that can be available, including loopholes that can be plugged. And Nana Akufo-Addo, when he was campaigning, repeated this, that we can get money from stopping corruption at certain points, and he also said we'll use oil revenue. So clearly, if we define these sources properly, we can do it. Asa Nkrumah says something that, I'm excited about, that we should use as the campaign to get this done and done well. That the politicians have been getting a lot of freebies, free this, free that, plus hefty ex gratia for free. Why can't the poor woman who cannot educate the child get free education for the child, senior high school?
Well. If you put the question that way, particularly when you introduce the elements of the ex gratia and all those things and box it, and you throw it out into the street, the masses would always win. Because, you're playing on the keyboards of people's emotions. You can't get trapped in the realm of populism. And nobody then seriously interrogates the issue. I'm sorry.
I must say welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm not being offensive. But a few things I want to clear. It isn't true, and we've passed that stage, to be honest with you, but it isn't true that the NDC at one stage did not publicly oppose this free SHS thing. It is true. And we've dealt with the issue here. They opposed it. If you recall the Otabil thing, Otabil's view was that free education is not necessary and it's not even possible. And the NDC went onto that trail. So but we've dealt with it. It's not an issue now, in my candid opinion. I also have a difficulty with Dr. Manteya's point about the golden share. What was the golden share? When the AGC became more than one country mine, the golden share had no significance. It was a veto thing. It was restrictive to our jurisdiction. When it went beyond the Ghanaian jurisdiction, and especially when the Anglo Gold Ashanti thing came in, the golden share had no real material significance, and it had no monetary value per se. The thing was more of a veto thing when we were just one thing here, and if you wanted to deal with within the Ghanaian jurisdiction, you couldn't exercise that veto in Tanzania, Guinea, or elsewhere. You
couldn't. To avoid predators taking over our flagship mine in
That's right.
Ghana.
Yeah, so to be honest with you, and I remember Tony Edu made this point about Kufuor had sold the golden share, and President Kufuor publicly came out and debunked it. So, well, that's my view. Then I have a difficulty, but I'm checking on that about the UO group not paying capital gains tax. I'm not too sure about that. We need to double check, because I know
he sits on the PIAC. You remember that?
No, but
and,
check.
And
no,
he does a lot of consultation work in this area.
As for his expertise and competence, that I would never doubt in that field. Even in terms of research, in terms of those things, I don't come near him at all. Please, make no mistake about that.
Okay.
I know where my strengths are.
It is the reason I suspect he won't get this wrong.
But don't forget, there are some small areas that I also try to do quite well.
Okay.
I'm not challenging him outrightly, but I'm saying perhaps we better do some double check, because I know of a battle that went on between the Eurogroup and the IRS and things. I know, seriously. And I know that certain payments and certain things were demanded. So we better do some checks and see. Now, let's come to the free SHS as announced by the president. I'm not, look, nobody can convince me that the president, in making the public announcement at Ekwapiman Secondary School, was doing so in a vacuum. The timeline he gave is September, isn't it?
September this year.
Yes, I am anticipating a situation where prior to September, we will be giving some program outlines. We will be giving some
rollout plan.
A roadmap. I'm anticipating. I'll be surprised if we are just going to wait till September and then we trigger the program. I don't think so.
No, that can't.
It can't happen.
Shouldn't that plan be ready, and should people like Nana Kumia not be speaking to that plan instead of the confusion that we have had
instead of the wait and see approach?
Be subjected to?
No, there isn't much confusion. I don't see the confusion. You may say some little inconsistencies.
We do
here
need
and
some
there.
clarity.
We'll come and, yes, thank you. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. But I don't think there's any confusion out there as far as I'm concerned. And I believe you were pointing to this heritage funding, the senior ministers, what they said and what the finance minister will come to deal with that.
Right.
For me, it's not a big deal. We can address that. But I am saying that, yes, the focus now for me is not on what happened in the past, all the debates and arguments and the things. The focus is on what program is going to be outlined, or the roadmap, so that we can interrogate that. That's when we would know whether indeed people are being meticulous, are being diligent or not. Or is just that throw it out there, win the masses' heart and minds. So in the absence of that program, of course, there's a vacuum. There's some empty space there. We don't know exactly what to say. But let's also not create the impression that all along, the MPP had not indicated sources of funding. Because when you made reference to the BBC thing, that's where my mind went. If you recall Akufo-Addo's evening encounter with the IEA, at the IEA. And I won't go through it because it's a long piece, but just where he indicated possible sources of funding. He says a percentage of the oil revenues allocated to the GMPC and for the funding of the budget, as well as a greater percentage from GET Fund, will be used to finance the program. Now, based on this, Dr. Jan Barford, Akomia referred to it, made this document public. Is the cost of the NPP is titled, The Cost of the NPP New Education Policy, Free Universal Education up to and including second cycle, SHS. They gave the cost, the fees, how much will be paid each year, academic year, the infrastructure, how much it will cost. But when it comes to financing, that's the relevant portion for this discussion. This is what he said. He says the new program will be financed by reducing the allocation to GMPC by 50% and redirect the resources to education. 60% of the annual budget funding amount of the oil revenue that goes to the budget, which hitherto had been spread thinly over various sectors, will be allocated to education. Finally, 40% of GET fund will be redirected to support the program. The point being made here is that they had outlined sources of funding. You may agree or disagree with the percentages and even whether it's viable or not. That's fair deal. I mean,
but at least it was outlined.
Yes, it was outlined. So it is not as if they hadn't had any idea as to where we would tap in to finance this program.
Yeah, so we expect them to be communicating in very clear terms rather than a senior minister suggesting possible, then somebody coming to say it's not, we won't do that, we have money.
Yes, yes.
And
that's
also
why
with an oil and gas industry which is still nascent, and you want to already cut GMPC's allocation, that is going to affect so many other parts of the economy. So those are debatable.
It's important we recognize the fact that this country risks being trapped in the Dutch disease syndrome. Because we are talking about only 3% of total government revenue. That's what the oil money is worth. Only 3% of total government revenue. We have abandoned the 97% and we are chasing just 3%.
But you still believe that this project is doable?
It's doable. It's doable. And not only should oil contribute, gold should also contribute.
Right. But Madam Bonacote sticks with the President Mahama approach of progressively rolling it out in quality, as
and
they
eventually
say.
getting to president.
Do you think that as they suggest, quality will be compromised in the process?
I don't believe so. See, Akufo-Addo at the IEA recognized this. He says, to change the situation, we'll redefine basic education and make it compulsory from kindergarten to the senior high school. To ensure that no child is denied access to secondary school, we will remove the biggest obstacles that currently stand in their way, cost and access. And when you go further, he talks about teacher training and all that. That's the element of quality. And we debated these issues here consistently. I don't see a Chinese wall between cost, access, and quality. It's how you blend it. It's the kind of program you put in place. It's the kind of competence that you bring on board in managing it. There's no way you can say, I'm going to deal with access, after which I'll come and deal with cost, and then after that I go to quality. There's an interrelationship.
I think our issue is cost recovery.
Now, Nana, what assurance?
Yeah, but what assurance? Talk to cost recovery, perhaps.
Yeah. Nana, what assurance can you give to our viewers and listeners that, like Kweku said, the quality will not be lost, and that this is going to be sustainable? What assurance can you give to them?
Well, thank you. I can give you every assurance, but you know the sweetness of the pudding is in the eating. When the details of the rollout comes, we would all then see, and then the implementation. Because Kweku has taken a lot of the wind out of my sails, because many of the things that he said are in the public domain. Way back 2012, where we launched our manifesto at the press center, there was a detailed presentation of the rollout of the
you came here on this show. We have discussed them over and again.
It talked about the first year, what's going to happen. The second year, what's going to happen. The third year, until completion in the fourth year. So it's a progressive thing. And the details were rolled out. And there was a section on the funding, detailed. It's unfortunate that I didn't bring it, but I'll make sure you get a copy. So it's a matter of polishing it up in the reality of 4 years after and bringing it out.
I get the feeling it's just a copy of what we were doing before. So it's a continuation of what... No, you're not going to do anything new. You're just going to do what we were doing. So let us just accept, and it's fine. We are happy to give you our formula to use.
Can I speak now? Something. As for NDC, when they talk about they leading somebody in free education, everybody will laugh. Because remember what they stole the country in 2012. But you see, Mantia talked about.
They had a change of mind.
They haven't talked.
No, they don't believe they had a change of mind. I remember right after they won the elections, they came. Samuel Kujeto came back here. I put it to him that you are against this and you are now doing it. This is the MPP's program. He said, no, this is ours.
But sometimes the point is this: we are all moving towards a convergence.
We are consistent.
Okay, let's end with Kweku says he has a few points to make.
You asked me to. I'm concluding. You see, Mantia talked about not just the oil money. The oil money is just less than 5% of GDP.
Right.
The rest of the economy is there. Look, we're talking about the GDP. If you have a system that manages the economy in such a way that the size and wealth in the economy reduces from 47 billion in 2011 to 37 billion today, it will affect your ability to fund social intervention like free SHS.
Okay.
So the quality of the management of the economy itself is a big issue. And so you shouldn't take the funding.
You mean the current quality of the management or the outgoing, the one that just went past?
Mona,
because the one that just went past
can I
created a stable environment.
Yes, but can I finish? I'm talking of the quality of the management that reduces GDP from 47 billion in 2011 to 37 billion in 2016.
Okay. Yes.
So it shouldn't. We shouldn't look at it in a static, as if everything is static.
It cannot be static.
Yes.
Okay.
Widening the economy, improving the economy, widens the space for more tax revenue and gives you the chance to fund this thing. So let's wait and see how it's going to roll out over the next 2
Thank you, Nana. Because we end with you.
Is this heritage fund thing? Perhaps what I need here is more or less education and information. I believe Madame Cote may be of help. See, the philosophy and the principle behind it, I'm for it.
Right.
I appreciate it. I understand it. What is the status of the Heritage Fund now? How much do we have in there? What is the interest? How much interest are we gaining? Where is it positioned? Because you see, we're being told this is for the future. Good. Keeping some money there for the future. I'm beginning to ask myself, how much have we made so far? What's the interest? In what currency form is it? Where is it lodged? What is the interest? So that it can give me an idea, okay, perhaps keeping it there for this long may bear some fruits. Otherwise,
ASAP issued a statement and gave us those details.
Ghana,
I don't know.
Bank of Ghana is the official manager of these funds, the heritage funds.
Right.
The heritage funds, unlike the stabilization funds, are placed in longer-term instruments offshore. Because those funds come in foreign currency and we place them in offshore instruments. We all know what is going on in the global interest rate environment.
That's right.
Interest rates are not very high.
Fantastic.
Therefore, we are not earning very high interest rates for those longer dated investments. Because as you know, the optimal yield curve is in the world is such that the longer dated it is, the lower the interest rate. Interest rates are generally higher in the medium to shorter term than out there. So it is lower. But because it is not funds that we need immediately, and because it's in risk-averse investments, it sits there earning less interest than the stabilization, but it's very safe and it's longer dated in terms of maturity. So it's not invested in Ghana. We can have that debate whether we should invest in Africa, in Ghana. After all, it's a sovereign wealth fund. We can have that conversation. But for now, in terms of now growing it, and it's still being in its baby stage, that it stays in foreign currency, offshore, and in dollars.
Yes,
in dollars.
And for the 6 years,
brings out a report every quarter.
For the 6 years so far, the total payments made into the fund plus interest is $277
million. Yes. In fact, in 2014, we put in
plus
a lot.
Interest.
Plus interest.
Yes, $277
It had always been about $43 million until 2014 when we put in $114 million.
Okay.
And then, Malik, let's also remember that oil prices are not where they are. Okay. So the inflow into it.
Thank you.
I have a very important education on this for government, for policy.
Okay, do that.
Very important.
Do that quickly for me.
You see, the keeping that money outside the economy is based on an economic principle. What we are doing today is irrational.
Really?
Yes, it's irrational, completely irrational. The principle is this. If you are an oil-producing country and you are producing at very high volumes, you will be earning a lot of dollars. If you were to bring all the dollars into your economy, the value of dollar will go down relative to your currency.
You're right.
So your currency appreciates. Meanwhile, you are an export-oriented country, so your exports become too expensive.
Exactly.
So you are not attractive.
I see.
Okay, but at the current levels of production, less than 100,000 barrels a day, if you brought the money, it would rather be helpful to your city,
and
into the economy. Exactly, and invest it. Look,
Right.
at what rate are private sector borrowing today? If you lend it to a Ghanaian private, find a mechanism.
I hope you are not saying that we should put the heritage fund into the hands of private industry.
No. Find a fund manager, a mechanism that ensures that you get higher returns. Keeping out there doesn't make economic sense.
Thank you very much. I think I got that education from people like Theo Echampong, who are doing very well with this thing. He's one in the oil industry. Thank you very much, Theo Echampong, and then lawyer Yawopong's academic article. Well, I guess that everybody must be in favor of free education, free SHS. It is about how we make it sustainable and don't compromise quality. Some people like me will be the last to be against it. I had to do some truck pushing, do some other menial jobs to supplement my SHS education, so will be the last to be against it. Now, this program is brought to you by Bank of Africa. Bank of Africa is pleased to announce the official opening of its new head office located on the first floor of Block A and B of the new Octagon building close to Mövenpick Hotel. The new ultramodern head office branch complements the Boga, Wa, Airport City, Opera Square, Teshi Nungwa, and Accra Central branches that were added to the Bank of Africa family in 2016. Visit any of their 26 branches across the country to experience their excellent customer service in a comfortable and serene ambiance. For further directions and other inquiries, please contact Bank of Africa on 0302 249690. 0302 249690. Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. Now, the moment when you can download and stream your favorite action movie within seconds, make seamless video calls, among others, without buffering, is here, and that's the time when you enjoy internet the most. You play your games without any difficulty, or even watch and stream a TV series that you love. Everybody loves the internet for one thing or the other, whether for gaming, for streaming movies, for learning, staying in touch with friends and family, or for business. MTN 4G gives you a better internet experience. 4G is life. So go on, get yourself a 4G device today and experience the power of MTN's ultra-fast and stable 4G network, the first mobile 4G network in Ghana. MTN, say hello to the future. MTN, everywhere you go. So as a farmer or a landscaper or gardener, if your bother or headache has been poor seasonal yields over the period, post-harvest losses due to short shelf life of your produce, then ACAP compost fertilizer is what you need. It's an organic fertilizer made from pure organic materials such as food and food waste, decomposed naturally into humus, very suitable for agricultural purposes. It has very high organic matter, good water retention properties, ideal for all crops, including vegetables, fruits, cereals, crop trees, among others. ACAP compost fertilizer is available in all leading agro input dealers and distributors across the country. For inquiries, please contact 026 40 781, 020 1735 56 4, or 024 34 73 15 8. Also, White Temple Agencies Limited, that's where you get the latest technologically advanced, trendy and durable, yet affordable stone-coated roofing tiles. Fairroof, that's a luxury you can afford. They have a variety of colors and designs from which you can choose. Their team of professionals will give you value for money and a guaranteed 1 year after-sales service support. All they require from you is your roof plan, and they'll build to your taste. You can locate White Temple Agencies Limited on plot number 65 Derby Avenue on the Children's Hospital Road adjacent NHIS Building Arena, or their sales office branch at the Old Wager Barrier, Accra West. You can call them 0302 67 3773 or 024 32 84 859. Fairroof, that's a luxury you can afford. And this is where we take a break. When we return, we get into the Parliament House, the august house that's been rocked by a bribery scandal for the approval of the nominee for energy minister, who is now the energy minister. And the Joe Gatti-led committee is now sitting. You've heard the chairman of the appointments committee, Joe Wise, take his turn. It's now the turn of Mahama Yariga, Muntaka Mubarak, and Samuel Okujeto, and we don't know who else may be coming. We'll be right back.